Joined by the SACP's first Deputy General Secretary, Soli Mapaila. Good evening, Mr. Mapaila. Thanks very much for coming through. You know, in an insert we've been playing for most of today, we have Walus's daughter saying, yes, he did what he did, but he's been in jail for nearly 25 years. Why can't you forgive him?
Well, it's not much a question of forgiveness. It's a question of repentance on his side, being remorseful. And he has not demonstrated that. And it's also a question of defending our right to exist as communists, our ideology. Because in his papers, in fact, it does indicate that whilst in some other papers that he had made, which we also feel that were self-serving papers for the purpose of him getting the parole through the ticket box process, where he does indicate that he's still committed to his ideology of hating communists. Now, we don't want anyone to hate communists, and therefore, if he comes out, he can still reorganize. But in any case, if you look at the court process that sentenced him to death, he should be grateful that through us, our liberation movement, for which Comrade Chris Hani belonged to, we banned the death penalty, and his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. And for him to come out in a very nefarious manner is completely unacceptable. That is why we had wanted him to follow a proper process, to engage with the family, to engage with the party, and to be remorseful properly, and he hasn't shown that.
Well, his legal representative, says he has shown remorse for his crime on several occasions and has also apologized to the Hani family for taking their husband and father.
That's why I'm saying that point came out much more later, and it was made for the purposes of him ticking the box of the parole process, because the parole condition requires the engagement between the victims and the offenders. And he didn't participate in that particular process. In fact, we had indicated to his lawyer some years ago that at one point when Sis Dimpo was traveling to Cuba, as she was departing, in fact, she was already on air, he sent us a letter indicating that he wants to engage with her. We indicated to him that she has traveled to Cuba. Immediately, he sent us that particular letter. He put that process into the parole application to say he has communicated with the family and the Communist Party. So that we could see it was not genuine, it was actually self-serving interest, because he wanted to meet the deadline for parole application. So his pronouncement through the legal team that is remorseful is completely untrue. He hasn't demonstrated that. And in fact, this only happened, even for that matter, after 20 years, and all these many other years, he has been quite repentant that he doesn't see anything wrong that he has done, and that actually could repeat it. In any case, his co-conspirator, Clive W. Lewis, who also used the same process and same arguments, after he was released on medical parole, he actually made a video which he demanded that must be released on his death, where he recommitted himself to anti-communism and to the fact that he will still commit the same atrocity that they committed together. So it's the same attitude that this one is displaying, abusing the court process, abusing the sentiments of forgiving South African nation, and we won't fall into that.
So what should he do to prove to you that he is really remorseful and genuine about it?
He must improve his conduct in prison. He must start the entire process anew, indicate, go through all the steps with genuineness, not only so that he can get a parole on the basis that for the number of years that he has served, maybe he qualifies for consideration for parole, not that he qualifies for parole, for consideration for parole, which, by the way, is another thing that his legal team doesn't understand. The parole is not a right. It's a process that can be given to an inmate on the basis of a number of considerations. So he qualifies for considerations for parole on the basis of the years that he served. But the consideration undergoes a number of factors, including the one I mentioned on victim-offender dialogue, which in this case has not taken place. That is why when he went to the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, the Supreme Court of Appeal agreed with the minister in the fact that we should be admitted into the court process as much as well as the Hani family to be admitted in the court process, because we were the main and interested parties, and which is what the court process has begun to do.
Okay, victim-offender dialogue is one, but
Yeah.
what else can he do to prove that genuineness you're talking about?
The remorseful component from his side in that, for instance, when there's that victim-offender dialogue, there's also a process in that, for instance, to determine the level of remorsefulness. In any case, according to the court process, in fact, the document which the minister considered, there were psychologists that went to see him, there were several other specialists that went to see him, and he has rejected all of that. In fact, they've actually came out to say the guy is not remorseful. In fact, whilst he admits that he may have made a mistake by killing Comrade Hani and taking away a breadwinner and a father, he does say he doesn't regret the fact that he killed a leader of the Communist Party. That's a very serious matter. So on the one hand, in that particular same process, his legal team then doesn't necessarily consider the professional aspect of black professionals. They actually argue today in court that they don't accept this. And when you look at the professional that did the work, it's black professionals. So they still bring in the extreme condescending views and arrogant views into the court process. So you can see this guy is not yet prepared to change.
But you don't think that there could well be many Janusz Waluses out there? It's just that they never killed Chris Hani and they never came forward. They were never subjected to any process like the one he has been particularly subjected to. Exactly
the reason why we should use this particular court process to demonstrate our right to exist, our right to have ideas, to follow a particular philosophical outlook, which in this case is communism. And we think that's a solution to all social problems facing humanity today.
Okay, so Mapaila, thank you very much for coming through this evening. He is